Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're talking about something far more dangerous than the economic cost of Brexit, though that catastrophe is very real, as you heard yesterday. We are witnessing the start of Brexit 2.0, a new, more insidious attack on the fundamental legal structure of the country, and it's being driven by the same populist panic that led the UK out of the European Union in the first place. The next target of the far right, led by Nigel Farage and his allies, is the European Convention on Human Rights, or ECHR. And my personal view is that this proposed exit is an act of constitutional vandalism disguised as a border control policy, and it is a move that would permanently stain the UK's reputation and actively make every single person in the country less secure. Who can allow the political class to scapegoat a bedrock human rights treaty that the UK itself insisted on drafting after the horrors of World War II, simply because they are incapable of managing a policy problem like the small boat crossings? This is a battle for the soul of the country, and the political center is already running scared. The push to leave the ECHR is a direct and frantic response to the problems of undocumented migrants arriving on British shores. That's a problem that successive governments have utterly failed to solve. And the populist argument is breathtakingly simple and deeply dishonest. The ECHR, and specifically its court in Strasbourg, is the only thing preventing the government from deporting asylum seekers and taking back control of the borders. And this narrative focuses on two key provisions. Article 8, which protects the right to family life, and we also have Article 3, which prohibits torture and inhuman or degrading treatment. The argument goes that asylum seekers can use these articles to launch endless appeals against deportation, tying the government up in legal knots. But this is a gross distortion of reality. The ECHR became part of UK domestic law in 1998 through the Human Rights Act, and it provides fundamental protections against the abuse of state power, protections that the UK helped invent. The idea that a nation that prides itself on the rule of law, and then they should quit an international treaty it helped found, a treaty designed to prevent atrocities like the Holocaust from ever happening again, is nothing short of national humiliation. The UK would be joining the company of only a few other nations in Europe outside the convention, a list that includes Russia, which was expelled for its invasion of Ukraine. And that is not the company a respected liberal democracy should ever keep. And what makes this situation so alarming is that the mainstream parties are succumbing to the populist pressure instead of fighting it with moral clarity. Both Reform UK and the Conservatives are pledging to stand at the next election on an ECHR departure ticket, effectively making the rejection of fundamental rights a core plank of their platforms. And the current governing party is already haunted by the failure of the 2016 Remain campaign, where they were totally outmaneuvered by the populist rhetoric, and they are terrified of repeating that mistake. And we see the direct consequence of that fear in the Home Secretary's plan to unveil a new law that will reform the way Article 8 is interpreted by UK courts, effectively trying to constrain its application in immigration cases. And the government is trying to perform a delicate Remain and Reform tightrope walk here, attempting to appease the far right by weakening the protections from within, all while claiming they want to stay in the convention. And this is a disastrous strategy. By accepting the premise that the ECHR is the problem, which it is not, they are legitimizing the entire populist campaign and inviting Farage to simply say, if you want to reform it, why not just leave it? And the Prime Minister himself, a barrister by profession and a supposed champion of the law, has been weakened by his own poor poll ratings, making him a liability for the cause, according to some progressives. And his attempts to talk about looking again at the interpretation of the ECHR only serve to provide cover for those who want to tear it down entirely. The fight to protect the ECHR is fundamentally a fight to protect British citizens' rights, not just the rights of asylum seekers. The Convention underpins the Human Rights Act, which guarantees your right to a fair trial, to freedom of speech, freedom of torture, and the right to private and family life. If the UK leaves the Convention, a future government could simply repeal or rewrite the Human Rights Act, stripping away decades of legal protection with no external judicial oversight from the European Court of Human Rights. And this would leave the rights of workers, of minority groups, and journalists vulnerable to the political whims of those who seek to undermine and deny them their rights, as one major human rights organization rightly warned there. Furthermore, quitting the ECHR would have devastating constitutional and diplomatic consequences. It would be a direct breach of the Good Friday Agreement, which explicitly guarantees the ECHR's enforceability in Northern Ireland, instantly destabilizing the peace process and straining relationships with Ireland and the USA. It would also likely terminate the part of the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement that deals with law enforcement and judicial cooperation, making it harder to extradite criminals and seriously damaging security cooperation with the European partners. The small boat crossings are a highly visible, emotive political issue, but the ECHR is not the cause. It's merely a convenient scapegoat. The problem lies in a broken domestic asylum system, a lack of safe and legal routes, and the government's failure to create effective returns agreements. As the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party have correctly argued, leaving the ECHR would make very little difference to small boat arrivals, but it would have a compounded impact on top of the chaos caused by the departure from the European Union. And you know how serious that is when I agree with the Greens. The battle-scarred Remainers and progressives are finally recognizing the scale of the threat and are attempting to get on the front foot this time, learning the harsh lessons of 2016. And groups like Best for Britain and Liberty are now coordinating a defense of the ECHR, warning that its use as a political tool has already had devastating real-world consequences. They know the campaign to leave the ECHR will be charismatic, simplistic, and easily digestible, just like the Brexit campaign was. The challenge is making a full-throated defense of a complex legal concept to a skeptical public here. They need to make it clear that the ECHR is not an abstract piece of foreign law. It's the legal shield that protects everyone, from veterans seeking accountability for actions abroad, to victims of domestic violence seeking justice, to every worker relying on freedom of association. And this is a fight that must be won because the stakes are existential. To leave the ECHR is to formally declare that the UK no longer believes in the post-war architecture of international human rights law, choosing isolation over influence and political expediency over legal integrity. And this is not about taking back control, this is about giving up control to the forces of illiberal populism and dismantling the hard-won rights of every citizen. The catastrophe of Brexit was primarily economic. The catastrophe of leaving the ECHR would be legal, constitutional, and moral. And my friends in Britain, you are now standing at the very edge of that abyss, and you must resist this cynical attempt to trade your fundamental freedoms for a fictitious fix to a border problem. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen.